If you're struggling to draw or paint your eyes and it's messing up your portraits, then I recommend you stick around for this video, as I will try to give you some very useful anatomy tidbits so you can hone in on your eye drawings. Whenever we look at somebody's face, we often look at their eyes first. That is why it is so important to get the eyes done correctly. Now, here's a little bonus tip. I know it's at the start of the video. For absolute beginners, I would recommend you start drawing from eye sculptures as a reference, because sculptures are a little bit more basic than a real eye. Like, they don't always have all the facial features. They don't have all the details, all the eyelashes, all the wrinkles. They're a bit smoother and a bit easier to copy. So if you're a brand new beginner, I'd recommend you start with that. And now, time for the actual meat and potatoes of the video, and time for the anatomy. So let's get started with doing just an eyeball on its own as the main course for today's video. Start off by drawing a sphere on its own, and then bisect it horizontally and vertically, and then bisect it diagonally with a 45-degree angle. Now, to turn this into an actual eyeball, we need some eyelids. So first off, start by putting the tear gland. That would be like this little boxy/triangular shape at one end. And then coming from that little tear gland, we can have two swooping lines. That will be our eyelids. Let's start with the upper one. Have this swooping line peak at this diagonal line, but not by much. The overall shape should still be very oval. And then have it come all the way to the other end in a nice swooping curve. Now, unfortunately, some footage was lost, so there's a pretty big jump here, but I'll just explain everything that happened and all the stuff that you need to know. So, you want to do the same thing for the lower eyelid, and the lower eyelid will tuck into the top eyelid right here, while the top eyelid kind of just fades out into nothingness almost. It's a very smooth sort of gradient. And then to actually make your eyelids 3D, you want to copy almost exactly the curve that you already draw for one of these lines, but then just displace it a little bit like above or below it to make that sort of 3D appearance of the eyelid, because it's not a flat thing, it like protrudes a little bit. So that will really give it that 3D look. Now for the tonal rendering / shading, don't worry too much about it. If you really want to, you could add some. Just go from darkest to lightest as you see in your reference. You could use cross-hatching, hatching, or really whatever you want. Not too big a deal. So that aside, let's get back to the anatomy. So the main last anatomical thing in this little eyeball drawing is going to be the iris and pupil, which seems like a very simple thing. It just seems like two spheres, but if you mess it up, it's going to look very, very weird. So for your actual iris, make sure that the top is like a decent chunk of the top is covered by the eyelid, because if it's not, the person's going to look like very surprised and almost like kind of psychopath, like really freaky looking. And also sometimes it is better to cover the bottom as well. If you don't cover it, it can also work, but just, keep that in mind. It can work both ways. For the size of the iris, keep it like around a quarter or a third of the visible area of the white of the eye that you have. And despite being called the white of the eye, never leave it fully white, because it actually looks kind of grayish and it reflects a lot of colors, so it can look blue or red depending on the lighting. Never leave it fully white, it looks very weird. And then for the pupil, just have this small, as perfectly spherical of a dot as possible that takes up, I don't know, I'd say again around a fourth, maybe even a bit less of the space in the iris. Make it as pitch black as possible, because that is, it's completely pitch black. And then carve out a highlight that can be any shape that you want. And yeah, that's pretty much it. By carving out, I kind of just mean you take your eraser and you really just take out whatever shape you want. Usually it's going to be something rectangular. That's pretty often the case. If the person is sitting in a room and there's a window with some light coming from it, and that light will kind of be reflected in the iris and will have this rectangular shape, because obviously windows are usually rectangular. And if you want a nicer, sort of more realistic gradient in your iris, then try to make the shadows as dark as possible around the edges, and then slowly come into the center, make it as light as possible, and make it once again a tiny bit darker. Now that, along with some extra shading and just general refinements that you may want to add to tie the whole thing together, is how you draw an eyeball. So to summarize, here's a little clip I have, sorry for the bad exposure. Horizontally, you want your tear duct and where your two eyelids meet to be at the same level. More or less, could be a bit above or a bit below, but generally the same level. There's also that imaginary 45-degree angle, which has the topmost and bottommost part of the eyelids. Keep in mind where you want to put your iris so that it is covered by the top eyelid most of the time. And that is pretty much it. There was also some smaller stuff, but I won't repeat them. That is pretty much it for today. I hope you guys really liked it, and more content coming soon.